Hello, Spectrum Women. It is I, Becca Lory Hector, one of the authors of Spectrum Women Walking to the Beat of Autism, as well as one of the editors right here at Spectrum Women magazine. We did last month, actually in August it was, we did a Q&A thing as an anniversary for the Spectrum Women book. And we took your questions, and you guys loved the video responses from the Spectrum Women authors. So I decided to sort of follow your lead in seeing that you guys enjoyed that, and figured I would do a monthly Q&A type video here called Ask the Spectrum Women. And I will be doing the majority of answering your questions once a month. But if I feel like some of the other Spectrum Women authors are better at certain questions and topics and would like to address it, I will certainly be inviting them to join us. This week, I have two really good questions, and I have one sort of commentary question that I'm going to be answering towards the end, because I want to make sure that I touch on it, but I don't want to take up the whole video with it. So with that, let's start. I have saved screenshots of the questions right here on my phone, on my Think Positive phone, and I'm going to read them first to you, and then I will go ahead and answer them. Okay, so the first one is, I've been told I've got some Asperger's traits, some traits of Asperger's. I've actually got lots and relate to listening so much to autistic adults on YouTube and reading their stories. I've been told that they won't give me a formal assessment as there is not much they can do for me. I am having an identity crisis and need understanding, someone to say I'm not going mad, and maybe a psychologist to help me unravel the last 43 years. Without a diagnosis, I feel in limbo. Self-diagnosis feels not solid somehow. Any advice? Well, yes, I do have advice. First of all, in one sense, people are correct in saying, what will a diagnosis do for you at this point? It doesn't really help you to get anything or offer anything. But what that does to me is it points out to me how much or how big the hole is for services for adults, especially adult women on the spectrum. We don't have specialists. We often don't test quite the same, and we have to be looked at a little bit differently and asked some different questions. I think that the other part of it, component of it, is that it's so expensive to seek a formal diagnosis. And for those reasons, me, like everyone else, I do have a formal diagnosis now, but the first thing that I did was self-test. That was my first inkling into that I was on to something. And what I say is, self-diagnosis is not to be tossed aside. There's a reason that self-diagnosis exists. When we take those quizzes and we take the time to answer those questions authentically and truthfully, we know the result is going to be true to our heart. And you don't just come out of nowhere and say to yourself, oh my God, I think I'm autistic, let me take that quiz, and while I'm at it, what shape is my face? I'll take that quiz too. It's not like that. You're seeking it because there is something upset in your life. There is something that doesn't make sense. There's something that you're not able to achieve or do. And along in that journey, you've come across this autism diagnosis. And so I say, don't poo-poo the self-diagnosis. I know that for some of us, I was one of them who felt like I needed to, after self-diagnosis, pursue a professional diagnosis. And that was for my mindset. And my mindset alone. I needed the validation. And I think some of that comes from living a life of being invalidated so much, which may be exactly where the person who's asking the question is coming from, right? And needing that kind of input. And so I say, we know innately if we're autistic. You know by the questions that are asked and your scores and your life experience, you just know. And the tests are really there to confirm what you know in here. And so if somebody tells you that you can't get an assessment because you're an adult female, A, they are wrong, and B, they're trying to protect you in some way. And so what that is all about them. And what I say is, people can tell you no a lot in this world, but you need to keep asking and you need to keep advocating. So I would say, put a big message out there. You're more than welcome to do it through Spectrum Women. Leave your location and ask people where they got their diagnosis. I say you want to be looking for someone who specializes in girls and women, or someone who specializes in adults on the spectrum, because we test differently. We haven't really come up with a diagnostic criteria yet, or changed the diagnostic testing yet, for adults. So until the world catches up with what we know anecdotally, that's the position we're in. So I say, one no doesn't mean no forever. If one person thinks it's not a good idea for you to get a professional assessment, that's that one person's opinion. And the one you're looking for in all of these opinions is the one in here. It's your voice. You probably silenced it for a really long time because you're sitting there undiagnosed and wondering what the heck is going on. But it's time to get tuned into there again, and to learn to trust that feeling again, to trust that voice again. I hope that helped to answer your questions. I know I did my formal diagnosis for very much the same reasons. I had done a self-diagnosis and I wanted to be validated. That doesn't mean that my diagnosis is any more valid than someone who's self-diagnosed. It was just my journey, my personal journey through finding out I was autistic. So I need you to find your journey. So to the question asker, I hope I've answered your question. I hope I've given you some ideas. Please know you can get in touch with me through the Spectrum Women site as well if I haven't, and please make sure you use this as a resource to find somebody local to you. And that is question number 1. On to question number 2. Okay. I think this may be part of the same set of questions, but I thought it was really interesting because I saw it asked twice by 2 different people. So that's interesting. So what I love is I really love this question, actually. I've not had a chance to answer it yet personally. I've seen it asked by other people and answered by other people, but I'm excited to take my turn at it. So here's the question. Is it possible to learn to unmask as a late diagnosed individual trying to fit in and do what is expected? I have no idea how to not live along scripts, internalized expectations, acquired scenarios, and protocols. How do I go on about the things in life? But doing them along those acquired methods causes autistic burnout. How can I live a more free life? I love this. Okay. I love this because it points out a lot of the different struggles of a late diagnosis. One of which is that your selfhood, your selfness has been so buried under your mask and under the trauma and experiences of trying to fit in without full knowledge about what it was that you were dealing with, working with, or any knowledge at all about how your brain worked. I know that because that's the life I lived until I was 36. I lived as a mess. I was angry, sad, frustrated, a lot of feelings because I had no respect for who I was inside. I didn't respect that person. That person wasn't respected by other people. And so when I got my diagnosis, what I did was I spent an entire year, a full year post-diagnosis, going to weekly therapy to learn to articulate my needs, to learn to understand who I was underneath all of this trauma, and how to learn to start listening again to my needs. And I think that's what the masking situation is about. Now, for many of us, those of us who get diagnosed late, masking becomes such a habit, such an ingrained habit, that whenever you find yourself in a majority neurotypical situation or in a situation that you feel uncomfortable in, the tendency is to revert back to the habit of masking. So I love that the question is, can you learn to unmask? So really what we're asking is, can you unlearn to mask? And yes, you can. I don't know if you can get rid of it entirely, especially not in today's world. I think it would be idyllic if we could be unmasked everywhere and every second of every day. But the society and world that we live in is really based on sameness. It's really fueled by the desire for sameness. And so people are expecting, the majority of people out there are expecting conversations and events to follow the pattern that they're supposed to follow, that the normalized sameness, right? Every wedding's the same, every this is the same, every that's the same, right? Every first day of school, all of those things. And what we need to learn to do is to unbuild those habits, to stop apologizing for our behavior. That's essentially what masking is. Instead of making someone uncomfortable with our authentic behavior, we choose their comfort over ours, and we mask our differences for their comfort level. But at the same time, it's costing us our comfort level. So I say, in today's world, mask versus unmask is about balance. I don't think you can go completely unmasked in today's world. I hope generations from now that I would be saying this differently. But in today's world, I don't think it's safe yet. I don't know that it's safe to disclose in all workplaces. I don't know that it's safe to unmask in all public spaces. I do know for myself, I will mask when I have chores that require some amount of socials. So being nice to the checkout lady at the grocery store, being nice to the lady at the bank. But what I try to do is keep my masking to those minimum tasks and not take masking with me into something that's more long-term. So not to take masking with me into a 3-day conference, not to take masking with me into a 2-week vacation, not to take masking with me into a job that I have to do X amount of hours every week, because that's the strain, that's when we feel the strain of the mask. Is that long-term sustaining the mask over a long period of time, rather than those short bursts of masking, like to get yourself through the grocery store or to get out of the bank in decent quickness and getting everything done. And I think in those scenarios, those pre-scripted routines that we've made habits are just easier and simpler to get through a task that's already hard. But when we have something that is a long-term commitment, that's an authentic commitment to who we are, we want to stay aligned with our choices. We want to stay aligned with the life we're choosing to live. And in order to do that, it means being our authentic selves. And we want to go towards being our authentic selves as much of our lives as possible, because that's the freedom. That's where that free piece comes in. And it's about picking and choosing right now in today's world, when the mask makes it easier to get through something, and when the mask is, you're taking it with you to get through something you probably shouldn't be involved in. That's more long-term, right? Like masking through a career or a job is a really heavy burden. And I know plenty of autistics who still, as professionals, are masking in their careers. And that to me is where I would run right into burnout. Those long-term commitments to the mask, are exhausting, and it's certainly a component of burnout I've had before and burnout that I almost just had. So masking has its dangers, but in today's world, not masking can be equally dangerous. And so I say it was a coping mechanism. It's not the healthiest, it's not the best, but it's still the easiest choice, the choice that uses the least spoons for some occasions. And that's what it comes down to, is where do I want to spend the majority of my spoons and where do I want to save them? And that's how I think about masking. So can you learn to do that? Yeah. With practice, a lot of mindfulness work, and a lot of honest critique of your own behaviors and your own desires and your own wants, needs, likes, all of those things. And that means spending some time with you and learning to articulate those needs. And that's hard work. But it's worth it in like every aspect of your being. So if that helped you to talk about some of this woo-hoo stuff that I talk about, I would love to share more of it with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I hope to be writing more blogs about it. But if you have any questions about the stuff that I talked about in that answer there, please go ahead and send me an email, either through Spectrum Women, or you can send it to info@beccalory.com. And I will do my best to answer you and send you some resources. All right. And now for our very last question, because it wasn't really a full-fledged question, but I do want to talk about the topic because I thought it was interesting and important. Excuse me. So somebody said, I want to see what pathological demand looks like and executive functioning looks like in adults. Most examples are for children. It would help to see more examples and an explanation for adults. Fantastic. I love this. Okay. Here's the deal. Honesty moment. Executive functioning is not one of the things that I personally struggle with. I can often get autistic inertia, which I think is a component of that pathological demand avoidance, executive functioning issues. I think that is a source for many autistics of the beginning of those challenges, of a component of those challenges. But for me personally, in my autism and in my life, I don't struggle with executive functioning. However, my husband does. And I can tell you that it shows itself in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's about initiating a conversation about how to begin a task. I know he has he'll get stuck in his inertia, but then at the same time, he can't kind of figure out what is step one of an activity. Like if he wants to do something, he can't necessarily figure out where to start and to get himself to the end. And so we'll often start by not doing anything. So to me, I think what a lot of executive functioning difficulties and pathological demand avoidance as an adult looks like is a lot of doing nothing. It's a lot of being stuck, so stuck that you can't get anything done, and so stuck that your list of chores piles up, and so stuck that you're embarrassed to ask for help. And so one of the things we've worked on as a couple is like, hey, I know as an autistic, all of my therapies have told me to work with a strength-based approach. So, hey, I'm really good at executive functioning and you're really crappy at it. Let me see if I can't help you to figure out some solutions. So between each other, we've sort of figured out solutions that work for him, different forms of reminders, different ways to use a calendar. But one of the things that we worked on the most was remembering to ask for help. Like remembering that it's just something that's hard for your brain to do, and it's not that you're broken or incapable of doing it, it's that you need like a kickstart in the butt of like what to do first, and like how somebody else might approach it. Because sometimes when I describe how I might approach an activity, he may choose a different way to approach it because I was able to talk through a breakdown of the activity. He's able to now kind of visualize it in pieces. So I say if you're struggling with those things, you want to remember that you can ask for help, that it's just like if you were missing an arm and you needed to lift up an object, you have a struggle and a challenge and you're allowed to ask for help. The other thing is to try out a bunch of different tools to help you, right? We have our cell phones, and if you're a big cell phone person, there's a gazillion apps for that. I can give you some recommendations if you'd like, but I say try a note-taking app, a calendar app, alarms, those kinds of things. And they do help a lot, and technology can help a lot. Like it's real cool that we have stuff available to us now that we didn't used to have, right? So there's ways to do it. And also just, an awareness that you struggle in this area is also extremely helpful. Like just saying, I struggle in this, and admitting it to yourself so that part of your inertia doesn't become, I'm so terrible, I can't do things, I'm so broken, and so that the negative self-talk doesn't begin as a part of that executive functioning, just hiccup kind of thing. There's also, I don't know if I should do this on video, I can't answer it, but there's a great book that I'm going to recommend that I hope you can see. I don't know how I can do. Okay, The Smart But Scattered Guide to Success. Okay, this is a great book for adults on the spectrum. Okay, and I'd give it a try. So if you have executive functions, this is my book recommendation for that. How's that for pulling a book off the shelf for help? Okay, so that's what I've got going on for you guys this week. Please go ahead and continue to send your questions to Spectrum Women Magazine. You can send it to us via email. You can post on our page. You can message through the page. And you can, of course, email me directly at info@beccalory.com. I will be back next month with a new installment of Spectrum Women's Ask a Spectrum Woman. I'm Becca Lory Hector, and I will see you guys next month. Thank you so much for your questions.